Hello, and a very warm welcome to the studio. In a previous video I did this study of glass using oil pastels. It's in black and white. I was just studying the tonal values of the subject and how I could depict glass using oil pastels, trying to achieve the sharpest possible edges to give the illusion that you're looking at a hard and shiny subject. Today, in this video, I'm going to do a drawing of the same subject but with colour in the background. So I've positioned the glass on a coloured base with a coloured background. I've got the photograph I used for the black and white drawing, which I'm going to use to help me to draw the shapes for the coloured version. And instead of oil pastel, I'm going to use chalk pastels or soft pastels. I've got some here which are unison colour soft pastels, and I've got a Rembrandt pastel for the white. I know that makes a really thick, strong white, but I've also got my box of all sorts of bits and pieces and different makes, some of which are harder and some of which are softer. So the first thing I need to do is to test them on the paper. And the paper I'm going to use is another piece of this pastel paper, which has got quite an insistent surface on one side, but it's a little bit smoother on the other side. And as previously, I will probably use the smoother side because I think I can achieve a clearer detail using the smoother side. What I've found with my colour testing is that the really soft unison pastels fill the surface of the paper. This is the rough side of the paper that I've done the colour testing on. But the cheaper unknown make of pastel, it's harder, more scratchy, it's not as pleasant to use as these lovely soft ones. And you can really see the texture of the paper on those areas, which for this drawing I don't really want. I think it's suitable for much larger, looser drawings, but for a smaller drawing where I want to be putting in some fine detail, I'm going to use the smoother side of the paper. And just a quick mention of some other things that are handy to have when you're pastel drawing. With soft pastels, a tin of fixative. Is good to have sometimes partway through the drawing if you want to fix a layer and it won't smudge anymore, or at the end to help to make the dust adhere to the surface of the paper, because of course a pastel drawing is just coloured dust loosely attached to the surface of the paper, and they are very prone to smudging. Another reason for having the work on an easel working upright is that dust, a lot of it just falls down to the bottom, to the ledge of the easel. And if you have your drawing flat or even slightly tipped up, the dust stays on the surface, actually obscures your drawing. You have to keep on tapping it off or blowing it. Whereas if it's upright, it's just naturally falling away from the surface. Makes it much easier to see what you're doing. What else have I got? Kitchen roll or an old tea towel for wiping your hands. And sometimes it's quite useful to move the pastel around on the surface if you don't like to do it with your hand. I think I prefer to do it with my hand. I've a slight discomfort with the feel and the sound and the feedback that I get from soft pastels, especially this harder pastel that's in the pencils. So these are Derwent pastel pencils, which are really good for putting in the fiddly little bits of detail or doing the drawing in the first place. But there is a sort of, I got a sensibility to the dry, sort of scratchy feel on the surface, which, as I say, I do find slightly uncomfortable. This could be why I don't work in pastel very often. And I do prefer oil pastel. It's much more smooth, it's more like painting. But don't let me put you off. You might not have the same feeling as I do. So I'm going to use the printout of the photograph to give me some guidance for doing a freehand drawing. So just to take some shortcuts in a different way from the way I've shown previously. And this is what I call the hovering pencil technique. So I'm using one of the pastel pencils and I'm going to hover it over a point that I want to mark to give me a guidance when I do the freehand drawing. So I'm taking this point here, the right hand side of the ellipse, taking the print out of the way and putting a mark in there, putting the print back exactly where it was before and hovering my pencil there to put that point in. Okay, taking it back. Don't need to do this too many times because I'm just going to mark in the most useful points. So I'm being very careful to put the paper back exactly the same place. And another way I can check is to do that to make sure that I'm in exactly the same place for putting the next mark in, which is going to be here. So this is giving me the width and the depth of the ellipse of the top of the glass. Okay, and do a little flick to see they're all agreeing. Yep, that's quite good. Let's put another point in here, which is where the intersection between the table and the wall comes, and also that curve of the shape of the glass there. Probably got nearly enough information now. Let's see. Come up at the bottom of the foot ring there. Begin to see the shape of the glass. I'm just going to take 2 more points before I start joining everything up. And that's where the wall and the table intersect at each side. There we go. Now I will need to take this off the easel so that I can get at it from different angles. important to be quite relaxed when you're drawing ellipses and be prepared to have, you know, a lot of lines in there, and as long as you're not resting your hand on the paper and you're taking a nice continuous movement, somewhere in there, somewhere in that sort of woolly mess of marks, there will be the ellipse that you want. Let's do this one at the bottom and we can identify an interesting phenomenon. Somewhere there. Now you can see quite clearly the difference in the ratios between the width and the height of each of these ellipses, and that's worth having a quick look at. So if I bring this up to the level of the lens of the camera, there we are. It should be the top rim of the glass makes pretty much a straight line. When I move it down, you can see that ellipse becoming deeper, which shows you what's going on with this phenomenon. As you bring it down from your eye level, you're seeing more of the circularness of it. That's a really fun and interesting thing to look at. So before you start drawing, it's worth just doing that a few times and observing how that ellipse changes shape or changes its ratio of width, the width to the height. So similar width, it is slightly narrower, but the height is much greater in relation to the width compared to this one. So that's useful to know, isn't it? So many times it's easier to turn work around or upside down to draw various aspects. Of course, another thing that I've noticed recently is that when you take a photograph, very often the side seems to be distorted, elongated. So if your drawing looks a little bit lopsided, make your drawing right rather than slavishly following the photograph. I'm not sure that this curve and that curve are as symmetrical as I'd like them to be. Anyway. Photograph is just for guidance, of course. You change what you need to change. Sometimes it's useful to drop a plumb line right down through the middle. Of your bottle or glass or whatever you're drawing, if it's a cylindrical shape, and then you can check the measurement. So I'm taking a measurement with the point of the pencil here and my finger on that halfway mark and comparing it to the other side, which is the same there. This bit that I'm not sure about started to change direction here. Move over to there. Well, it's pretty similar. Not here, maybe. This is square, I need to do a bit of adjusting. Yeah. Further to the left there and further to the right. Straightened the stem up. I'm just reinforcing the shape of that lower ellipse based on some of these woolly marks I made, these light and sketchy marks. I'm finding the mark that I think truly describes the shape of that ellipse. One of the points of reference I put in before was here, but having taken this measurement, I was quite happy with the way I've drawn that side, so I took this measurement from this side to the middle and I'm transferring it to that side, and I found that I needed to have this side of the ellipse much further away, much further to the right than I'd actually put that mark in. So the marks are for guidance, again, like the photograph is for reference and guidance, but in the end what you want to look right is what you've got on the paper, so be prepared to make whatever changes you need to make for your drawing to look right. To make another mark across the middle. Let's see if is that parallel to the top? Parallel to the top of the page. Let me just check. So putting the point of the pencil on the line I just made. My fingers here at the side of the paper, coming down to here. My fingers at the side of the paper there at the top. I could just nudge that a little bit lower, this side. Redraw that line. Okay, so now as long as I get this curve symmetrical this way and level, that point there, the widest points being level. Of course, a cylindrical object, if it's sitting on a flat surface, the two widest points of each ellipse are going to be horizontal, even though this background, like this line here, which represents the edge of the table, is at a slight angle. Because this surface is level, all the ellipses are going to be level as well. Turn it the right way up and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so all the ellipses are going to remain horizontal, even if I'm looking at the table in perspective. That's why that's sloping slightly, because the table is sloping away in perspective. So many things to ask questions about and investigate why something appears to be a certain way, which is one of the fascinations of drawing, I think. Helps you to identify what the mechanics are of the visual world. Something I see often when people are trying to draw cylinders is these outside corners of the ellipses are sometimes drawn as a point, which doesn't work very well when describing a circular object. It's important to have that tight little curve where all that energy is focused as a curve rather than a point. Okay, so no, it doesn't matter that there are guidelines showing, because this all gets covered up with pastel as I do the drawing.